Okay, so the city of McCall, if you're new to the area, haven't made that trip up Highway 55 from the Treasure Valley, it's a beautiful place to recreate, relax, get in your wildlife fix. But the city says some of that wildlife is starting to get a little too comfortable in the city, and residents are getting too comfortable with them. Sean texted us this morning and said, "Are you aware of the city council McCall deer proposal?" Well, we weren't, but then we looked it up and looked into it. And coming up in less than a half an hour from now, the McCall City Council, they're getting ready to take up that proposal put forth by the McCall Police Department and the Department of Fish and Game, one that would prohibit the feeding of wildlife. They say not only is this causing illnesses within the animals like deer, but as a species, they're supposed to migrate during the winter, and then when they're being fed, they don't because, well, for decades, they have been fed by residents and visitors. The city says their proposal isn't an effort to eradicate those animals, but to get them back into their natural migration patterns. Here's Katya Stepovic.
These deer have been fed for decades, and so that's several generations of deer that have never learned to migrate, which is what deer in cold parts of Idaho all over the state do every winter, is they migrate to lower ground to find food. These deer don't know how to do that.
Deer in McCall are abundant and year-round, which isn't their typical behavior. Regan Berkeley, the regional wildlife manager in McCall, says a majority of that has to do with humans continuing to feed deer, and that is leading to other issues.
We have a suspicion that there may be some deer in town that have an exotic louse that's causing them to lose most of their hair in the winter. Wildlife are pretty well equipped when they do migrate to find food on their own and thrive in that kind of situation.
So how do you break a decades-long habit?
It's a tricky situation because there is no perfect solution right now. You know, this is something that if you could go back in a time machine and not feed deer 60, 70 years ago, that would be the only perfect solution.
But that's not an option, so?
The best response would be to trap and translocate, and that is something that we are equipped to do and prepared to help with.
Berkeley says not feeding deer during the winter season would lead them to starvation, something the Idaho Department of Fish and Game doesn't want to see.
So each deer would be inspected. Every healthy deer would get relocated, and any deer that we were concerned about transmitting any kind of parasite or disease would be euthanized.
But as Justin Williams, chief of police for the city of McCall, says, the proposal isn't sitting well with everyone.
It's an emotional issue, of course. And many times when emotion takes over, rationalization goes out the window. And so we've seen about a 50-50 split for the most part of people for it and people against it.
But he says that it's in the best interest of the public to move forward with this plan.
We continually respond to injured, maimed animals from car accidents. We've had aggressive deer confront people with dogs and children and things. We have fawns being born in people's backyards, attracting predators. We've had an increased sighting of mountain lions in the last several years during the winter when they should not be here as well. We realize the deer herd here is something of an enigma in that people enjoy seeing them. Visitors love seeing them, but they don't see the other aspect of what we have to deal with the safety.
And Berkeley just wants residents and visitors to understand that this isn't an all or nothing deal.
No, deer will not be eradicated from McCall. We're hoping to, help these deer relearn wild habits, and those wild habits include coming back to places like McCall in the summertime.
All right, Katya, so how do you enforce something like this? Is this going to fall on the police department, and how are they going to pay for this?
Well, Brian, that's a great question. And if the feeding ordinance passes tonight, authorities will start with an educational approach. At first, just kind of letting residents and visitors know what is and what is not allowed. Like, for example, you can still feed songbirds. But eventually, feeding wildlife can result in a fine of $100. And another violation within 1 year of that is a misdemeanor. And as far as funding goes, they predict the relocation program will be around $50,000. And Fish and Game is basically offering to help do this on their own dime.
Well, they've been doing it for decades, and I know a lot of people up there like to see those animals in their backyard. It's kind of one of the perks of living in the mountains. So we'll see how this plays out if it does pass council tonight. Thanks, Katya.